The empire was very big. It spread across 17 star systems, and billions of beings lived under its rule. At the center of this great empire stood the Obsidian Palace. The palace was made of black crystal that caught the light of 3 moons and turned it into rainbows. It was beautiful beyond words. But the most important thing in the palace was not the crystal walls or the golden thrones. It was the creature that lived in the highest tower. The creature was called, and it was a celestial. In simple words, it was a dragon from the stars. But calling just a dragon was like calling an ocean just water, was ancient. It had lived for millions of years. Its body was covered in scales that looked like they contained tiny galaxies. When you looked at one scale, you could see stars being born and dying inside it. There was as long as a small mountain, and its 7 eyes glowed like purple suns. The people believed that the celestial proved their emperor was chosen by the universe itself. As long as was happy, the emperor had the right to rule. This was their oldest law. This was their deepest belief. But there was a problem, a very big problem. Was not happy, was crying. Every night when the 3 moons rose into the sky, the great would curl into a ball in its tower and weep. But these were not normal tears. When cried, its tears were made of liquid starlight. They glowed white and gold, and they burned hotter than fire. The tears would fall through the floor of the tower, burning holes in the crystal. Then they would fall down, down, down onto the city below like tiny meteors. For 5 years this had been happening. The people of the capital city lived in fear. They built shelters. They ran when the moons rose. Many buildings had been destroyed. Many people had been hurt. And nobody knew why there was crying. Nobody knew how to make it stop. Emperor IV had tried everything. He had brought in experts from across the galaxy. The Mind Weavers came first. They were famous for being able to read thoughts and heal broken minds. They tried to enter consciousness. 3 of them went mad. The others ran away and never came back. Then came the Beast Masters. They were a warrior race who had tamed the most dangerous creatures in the universe. They said they could calm any beast. They were wrong. The lead Beast Master spent 1 hour with and then walked out of the tower without speaking. He booked passage on the first ship leaving the planet and was never heard from again. Scientists came, doctors came, priests came, mystics came. Ancient artificial intelligences that had existed since before the empire were consulted. Everyone had theories. Some said was sick. Some said was broken. Some said the bond between thee and the emperor's bloodline had been corrupted somehow. They tried medicine. They tried surgery. They tried magic and technology and everything in between. Nothing worked. They kept crying. The meteors kept falling, and the emperor grew more desperate with each passing night. Into this situation came a human woman named Myra. She was 28 years old with dark hair and tired eyes. She was nobody special. In fact, by the standards of the galaxy, she was less than nobody. Myra had come from Earth's colony on IV. It had been a small colony just starting to grow, full of hope and dreams. Then the raiders came. They were space pirates who cared nothing for life. They destroyed the colony and took the survivors as slaves. Myra had watched her home burn. She had lost everyone she loved. Now she was in debt. The transport company that brought refugees to safety charged money that nobody could pay, so the refugees had to work. They were sold to rich households as servants. They would work until their debt was paid. This could take 20 years. This could take a lifetime. Myra was sold to the Obsidian Palace, but she was not given a good job. Humans were considered primitive by most of the galaxy. Earth had only discovered space travel 200 years ago. Compared to empires that had existed for millions of years, humans were like bobbies. So Myra was given the worst job in the palace. She cleaned floors. She hauled waste. She worked in the dark basement levels where no one important ever went. On her first night in the palace, Myra lay on her small bed in the servants' quarters. The room was tiny. She shared it with 3 other servants from different species. The walls were thin, and through those walls she heard something that made her heart hurt. She heard crying. It was not a sound, exactly. It was more like a feeling that came with a sound. The crying seemed to come from everywhere and nowhere. It was deep and old and full of a sadness that Myra had never felt before. It made her think of the ocean on Earth that she had seen in pictures. It made her think of the space between stars. It made her think of being alone. "What is that?" she whispered. Her roommate, a small lizard-like being named, did not even open his eyes. He said, "It cries every night. You will learn to ignore it. Everyone does." But Myra did not ignore it. She could not ignore it. She lay awake that whole night, listening to the ancient creature's grief echo through the crystal walls. Something stirred in her chest. It was a feeling she could not name. It was like a hook had caught her heart and was pulling her toward the sound. In the morning, she went to work as usual. She scrubbed floors. She carried heavy things. She did everything she was told. But a part of her mind was somewhere else. A part of her mind was in that high tower, wondering why something so powerful and so old was so terribly sad. She did not know it yet, but that night had changed everything. The crying of the celestial had reached across the palace and found the one being who might actually hear it. Not hear it as a problem to be solved. Not hear it as a malfunction to be fixed, but hear it as what it truly was. A cry for help. And Myra, the lowest servant in the Obsidian Palace, had heard it. Myra was not supposed to go to the upper towers. Her work kept her in the basement. The basement was dark and smelled bad, and nobody important ever came there. That was where servants like her belonged. That was the rule. But humans had a problem with rules. At least, that is what the other species said. Humans were curious. They asked too many questions. They went to places they should not go. They could not leave things alone. The other servants called it a weakness. They said it would get humans killed someday. Maybe they were right, but Myra could not help it. Every night she heard the crying. Every night she felt that pull in her chest. And every day she found herself drifting a little closer to the obsidian tower. It started small. She would take a wrong turn while carrying supplies. "Oh, sorry," she would say, "I am new here. I got lost." Then she would look around with her human eyes, taking in everything she could see before someone sent her back down. Then she started volunteering for jobs that took her to higher floors, delivering packages, carrying messages, anything that let her climb a few more levels. Each time, she got a little closer to the tower where lived. A servant named Eth noticed what she was doing. Eth was a species with 4 arms and blue skin. She had worked in the palace for 30 years. She had seen many things. She had seen curious servants get executed for going where they should not go. "You need to stop," Eth said one day. She grabbed Myra with 2 of her arms and pulled her into a storage closet. "I have been watching you. I know what you are doing. You are trying to get to the—" Myra did not lie. "Yes," she said simply. "Why are you trying to die?" "I just want to understand." Eth made a sound of frustration. "There is nothing to understand. Thee is crying. Nobody knows why. Beings far smarter than you or me have tried to find the answer. They all failed. What do you think you can do?" Myra was quiet for a moment. Then she said something that surprised even herself. "They are all trying to fix but has anyone tried to just listen to it?" Eth stared at her. "Listen to it. It is a celestial. It has existed since before our species evolved. What could you possibly say to such a being? What could you possibly understand?" "I do not know," Myra admitted, "but I have to try." Eth let her go. She looked at the human with a mixture of fear and something that might have been respect. "You are going to get yourself killed," she said, "but I suppose that is your choice." Over the next few weeks, Myra watched and learned. She found places where she could see the experts coming and going from tower. She hid in shadows and listened to their reports. She was very good at not being noticed. Humans were small and soft and easy to overlook. For once, she was grateful for that. What she saw made her sad and angry at the same time. The experts did not talk to, they talked about. They discussed this biology like it was a machine. They measured its tears and analyzed the chemical composition. They scanned its brain and mapped its neural pathways. They treated it like a broken engine that needed to be repaired. When they did speak to, they spoke in commands. Hold still. Open your eyes. Tell us where it hurts. They asked questions, but they did not wait for answers. They had already decided what the problem was. They just needed to confirm their theories, but never confirmed anything. They lay in silence most of the time. It answered their questions with short words or no words at all. And every night when they all went away, it cried. Myra began to understand something. These experts were very smart. They knew things about biology and psychology and magic that she could never understand. But they were missing something obvious, something so simple that they could not see it. They never asked how it felt. On Earth, humans had lived alongside other creatures for thousands of years. They had dogs and cats and horses. They had learned to read the emotions of beings that could not speak. A human could look at a dog and know if it was happy or sad or scared. A human could hear a whale singing and feel the loneliness in its voice. This ability had a name. It was called empathy. Empathy meant feeling what another being felt. It meant understanding without words. It meant looking at something completely different from yourself and still seeing a person inside. Myra had empathy. All humans did. It was how they had survived on their dangerous planet. It was how they had built families and tribes and civilizations. And now, listening to cry night after night, Myra felt that empathy pulling at her heart. There was not broken, there was not malfunctioning, there was sad, deeply, terribly sad, and nobody had bothered to simply sit with it and ask why. One night Myra made her decision. She stole a maintenance access card from a sleeping guard. She waited until the palace was quiet. Then she began to climb. The obsidian tower had 1,700 stairs. Myra climbed them all. Her legs burned. Her lungs ached. But she did not stop. Above her she could hear the crying growing louder with each step. The upper floors of the tower were damaged. Burning tears had melted holes in the crystal. The air was hot and smelled like ozone. The guards had abandoned their posts long ago. Nobody wanted to be near the grieving. Finally, Myra reached the top. She pushed open a door and stepped into a vast chamber. There in the center of the room lay. It was huge. Myra had known it would be big, but seeing it in person was different. Was curled into a spiral, its galaxy-covered scales shifting slowly like oil on water. 7 closed eyes were arranged in a crown around its massive head. Tears of liquid starlight pooled beneath it, burning small holes in the floor. Myra's heart was beating fast. She was terrified, but she was also certain. She had come this far, she would not turn back now. She walked across the scorched floor and sat down about 6 meters from the nose. She did not speak. She did not demand attention. She just sat there, a tiny human in the presence of something ancient and vast. And she waited. Myra came back the next night, and the night after that, and the night after that. She did not speak. She did not touch she did not bring machines or medicines or magical tools. She simply climbed the 1,700 stairs, sat down in her spot on the scorched floor, and stayed there until dawn began to light the sky. Then she would climb back down, return to the servants' quarters, and pretend she had been sleeping all night. The other servants noticed that she looked tired. Eth gave her worried looks but did not ask questions. The head servant scolded her for moving slowly, but Myra did not care. Every night she returned to the tower. Every night she sat with. On the 4th night something changed. Myra was sitting in her usual spot, watching the starlight tears pool on the floor. There was curled up as always, its 7 eyes closed. The crying was quieter tonight. Maybe that was just her imagination. Maybe she was just getting used to it. Then one of the eyes opened. It was huge. The eye alone was bigger than Myra's entire body. It was purple and deep, with swirling lights inside it like a galaxy being born. The eye focused on her, and Myra felt something press against her mind. The feeling was strange. It was like someone knocking on a door inside her head. For a moment she was scared. Then she took a breath and let the door open. A voice filled her mind. It was not really a voice. It was more like thoughts that were not her own. The thoughts were old and vast and very, very tired. "Why do you come here, small thing?" Myra's heart was beating fast, but she kept her voice calm. "Because you are sad," she said out loud, "and no one should be sad alone." The eye blinked slowly. More eyes began to open, one by one, until all 7 were looking at her. Myra felt the weight of that gaze. It was like being looked at by the universe itself. Many beings would have gone mad from the pressure, but humans were strange creatures. They had looked up at the stars since the beginning of their existence and felt wonder instead of fear. They were used to feeling small. "The SPECILSTSAMY sadness is a malfunction," said. The voice in Myra's mind was slow and careful, like they was not used to speaking this way. "They say it is a chemical imbalance, a corruption of my bond with the Emperor's bloodline." Myra tilted her head. "What do you say it is?" There was a long silence. The starlight tears slowed their flow. The purple eyes widened slightly, and Myra felt something like surprise coming through the mental connection. "No one has asked me that before." "Well, I am asking now." Another silence, but this one felt different. It felt like something was shifting, like a door that had been locked for thousands of years was slowly beginning to open. When spoke again, the voice was softer, smaller, almost fragile despite its vastness. "I am lonely." Myra felt her chest tighten. She had expected many answers. She had thought maybe there was sick or hurt or angry. But loneliness. This ancient creature bonded to an emperor surrounded by servants and specialists, living in a palace of billions, lonely. "Tell me about it," she said gently. "Tell me everything." And did. They told her about the beginning. Long ago, before the Empire existed, before most species had evolved, there were 13 celestial. They were born from the death of an ancient star. They swam together through the dark spaces between galaxies. They sang to each other across distances that would take light millions of years to cross. They were a family. Then the younger species discovered them. The empires that rose and fell across the universe learned that Celestial had great power. They could see the future. They could move between dimensions. They could do things that seemed like magic. The empires wanted that power, so they hunted the. One by one, the 13 siblings were captured. They were bonded to royal bloodlines, which really meant they were chained with psychic locks. They were put in towers and temples and treated as symbols, living proof that their captors had the right to rule. 8 of them died over the millions of years. Some died of grief. Some died when their empires fell. Some simply faded away, too sad to keep existing. Now only 5 remained. Was one of them. Its 4 siblings were scattered across the galaxy, bonded to 4 other empires. They could not speak to each other. They could not see each other. They could not even feel each other's presence through the psychic bonds that imprisoned them. Had not heard another celestial's voice in 300,000 years. The emperor visited once per year for ceremonies. The specialists came to examine and measure and test. The servants brought food and cleaned the tower, but none of them talked to. None of them asked how it felt. None of them cared about anything except what they could do for them. "I have been alone for so long," said. The voice was trembling now. "I have been so alone that I forgot what it felt like to not be alone. I forgot that anyone could hear me. I forgot that anyone would want to." Myra was crying. She did not know when she had started. Tears ran down her cheeks, small and human and not made of starlight at all. But they were real. They were honest. "I hear you," she said. "I want to hear you. I am here." "You are so small," said. There was wonder in the voice now, mixing with the sadness. You live for such a short time. Why do you care about the pain of something like me?" Myra thought about the question. She thought about Earth, about the dogs and cats humans had loved, about the elephants they had tried to save, about the whales whose songs they had recorded and studied for decades. She thought about how humans had always looked at other creatures and tried to understand them. "Because that is what humans do," she said finally. "We see someone in pain and we want to help. It does not matter if you are big or small, old or young, human or something else entirely. Pain is pain. Loneliness is loneliness. And no one deserves to suffer alone." His great head lowered until it was almost touching the floor near Myra. The seven eyes studied her with an intensity that felt like being seen for the first time. "You are the first being in 300,000 years to truly see me," they said. "Not as a symbol, not as a tool, but as myself." Myra reached out her hand. It was tiny compared to the smaller than a single scale, but she placed it gently on Snout. "Then I will keep seeing you," she promised, "for as long as you need." That night, for the first time in 5 years, the crying stopped. The news traveled fast through the palace. The meteor tears had stopped falling. For the first time in 5 years, the people of the capital city could sleep without fear. The crystal floors of the obsidian tower were no longer melting. Something had changed. The emperor's advisors were confused and suspicious. They had spent millions of credits on experts. They had tried everything science and magic could offer. And then, suddenly, the problem just stopped. They investigated. They asked questions. They reviewed security records. That is how they found out about Myra. The guards brought her to the throne room in chains. Her wrists were locked in heavy metal cuffs. Her simple servant's clothes were dirty from her work. She looked small and scared standing in that vast hall of black crystal and gold. Emperor IV sat on his throne, watching her with eyes that had seen empires rise and fall. He was tall and thin, with gray skin and a face that showed no emotion. He had ruled the empire for 200 years. He had ordered the deaths of millions. He had no patience for servants who broke the rules. "You entered the Celestial's chamber without permission," the emperor said. His voice echoed through the hall. "You, a human servant, a dead slave, you went where only the chosen may go. Do you know the punishment for this crime?" Myra's legs were shaking, but she kept her voice steady. "Death, I assume." "Death would be a kindness. The usual punishment is much worse." The emperor leaned forward. "But before I decide what to do with you, I want to understand something. My specialists have worked for 5 years. They have used every tool available to the greatest empire in the galaxy, and they failed. Then you, a primitive human who scrubs floors, walk into the tower and somehow make the crying stop. How?" Myra took a deep breath. This was her chance, maybe her only chance. She had to make them understand. "The specialists were trying to fix," she said. "They treated the like a machine that was broken. They measured and tested and analyzed, but they never asked the most important question." "And what question is that?" "How do you feel?" The emperor stared at her. The advisors around him exchanged confused looks. This was not what they had expected. "Is lonely," Myra continued. "That has been alone for 300,000 years. It has siblings, other celestial, but they were captured by other empires long ago. They cannot speak to each other. They cannot feel each other. Imagine being separated from everyone you love for that long. Imagine being surrounded by billions of beings, but none of them really seeing you. None of them caring about you as a person." "The Celestial is not a person," one of the advisors snapped. "It is a divine symbol of our emperor's right to rule." "No," Myra said, and her voice was stronger now. "Is a person, an ancient person, a powerful person, but still a person, with feelings, with memories, with a need to be seen and heard and understood. You have kept in that tower like a trophy. You have treated the like a thing, and you wonder why it cries." The throne room went silent. No one spoke to the emperor's advisors like this. No one challenged the way things had always been done, certainly no human dead slave. But Emperor IV did not look angry. He looked thoughtful. He had ruled for 200 years, and he had learned one important lesson in that time. Truth could come from unexpected places. "What do you propose?" he asked. Myra's heart jumped. He was listening. He was actually listening. "Two things," she said. "First, let me keep visiting, not as a servant but as a companion. Someone who is there just to talk, just to listen, just to be present. That does not need more experts, needs a friend. And the second thing." This was the hard part. This was the thing that would either save her or get her killed. "Help contact the other Celestial. There are 4 others bonded to 4 other empires. They are all lonely. They are all grieving. They have been separated from each other for hundreds of thousands of years. If you could establish communication between them, even just letting them hear each other's voices again, it would mean everything." The advisors exploded in protest. They shouted about politics, about security, about the balance of power between empires. The other 4 empires with Celestial were rivals of. Some were enemies. Opening communication with them would be complicated at best, dangerous at worst. "This is madness," the chief advisor said. "We cannot share our greatest asset with our enemies." "Is not an asset," Myra said quietly, "is a prisoner, and I am asking you to give that prisoner back a piece of their family." The argument continued. The advisors talked over each other. The guards looked uncomfortable. Myra stood in her chains, waiting, hopping, praying to whatever gods might listen. Then a voice filled the throne room. It was vast and ancient, and it came from everywhere at once. Every being present felt it resonate in their minds. "Please." Everyone froze. The emperor went pale. The advisors fell silent. "Let her stay." It was. The Celestial had not spoken to anyone except the emperor in 10,000 years. But now this voice echoed through the palace, reaching every corner, touching every mind. "This small human has shown me more kindness in 4 NIGHTS than I have received in 300,000 years. She sees me. SHE hears me. She treats me as worthy of care. If you take her from me, I will not stop crying. I will cry until your empire turns to ash." The threat hung in the air. It was not an angry threat. It was a sad one, the voice of a being who had nothing left to lose. Emperor IV looked at Myra for a long moment. Then he did something that shocked everyone in the room. He smiled. "Remove her chains," he ordered. "This human is no longer a servant. From this day forward, she is the official companion to the Celestial. She will have access to the tower at all times. She will be given quarters in the palace proper, and her debt is cancelled." Myra's chains fell away. She rubbed her wrists, barely able to believe what was happening. "As for the communication with other empires," the emperor continued, "we will begin negotiations immediately. It will take time. It will be difficult, but if it brings peace to our divine guardian, it will be worth it." The advisors looked horrified, but they did not argue. They could not argue with a command from both the emperor and the Celestial. As Myra was led out of the throne room, she heard its voice one more time, soft and warm in her mind. "Thank you, little human. Thank you for hearing me." Myra smiled through her tears. "Always," she whispered. "That is what friends are for." 3 years passed. They were the most complicated 3 years in the history of the empire. Emperor IV sent messages to the 4 other empires that held Celestial. At first, they did not believe him. They thought it was a trick. Why would the emperor suddenly want to help there? What did he really want? But was patient. He explained what Myra had discovered. He shared records of suffering. He told them that there were probably suffering too, crying in their own towers, grieving for siblings they had not seen in hundreds of thousands of years. He asked them to check. He asked them to really look at their, not as symbols or tools, but as living beings with feelings. Slowly, one by one, the other empires began to listen. They examined their celestial more carefully. They asked questions they had never thought to ask. And they found the same thing. There were lonely too. There had been crying in their own ways, suffering in silence, waiting for someone to notice. The negotiations were hard. There were arguments and threats and moments when it seemed like everything would fall apart. Old enemies did not become friends overnight. But the emperors and queens and councils who ruled these empires all wanted the same thing. They wanted their celestial to be healthy and content. A happy meant a stable empire. So they kept talking. During those 3 years, Myra visited every day. Not every night anymore because the no longer cried when the moons rose. But every day she climbed the stairs to the tower, sat with her friend and talked. She told about Earth, about blue skies and green forests and oceans that stretched to the horizon, about dogs that wagged their tails when they were happy and cats that purred when they were content, about humans who had looked up at the stars and wondered if they were alone in the universe. Told her about the beginning of everything, about watching galaxies form from clouds of gas and dust, about swimming through the void between stars with 12 siblings, singing songs that took 1,000 years to complete, about the joy of existence when you had others to share it with. They became true friends. It did not matter that one was an ancient cosmic being and the other was a young human woman. Friendship does not care about such things. Friendship only cares about two hearts that choose to know each other. Then, at the end of the 3rd year, everything was ready. The 5 empires had built a quantum communication network. It was expensive and complicated, using technology that had never been attempted before. But it would allow the 5 celestial to speak to each other across the vast distances that separated them. The day the network activated, Myra was sitting in the tower with as usual. There was nervous. 7 purple eyes blinked rapidly. Galaxy-covered scales shifted and sparkled. "What if they have forgotten me?" asked. "What if they do not recognize my voice?" Myra put her hand on the snout. "They are your family," she said. "Family does not forget." The quantum link opened. For a moment there was only silence. Then, from across the galaxy, a voice touched mind. It was different from his voice, but also somehow the same. It carried the same ancient weight, the same cosmic vastness. "Sibling, is that you?" His whole body trembled. The 7 eyes filled with tears, but these were not tears of starlight. These were tears of joy. "Yes," replied. "Yes, it is me, I am here." More voices joined. One by one, the 4 other celestial connected to the network. They spoke in a language that had not been heard in 300,000 years, a language of thoughts and feelings and memories shared across the impossible distances of space. Then they began to sing. Myra had never heard anything like it. The song was not made of sounds. It was made of light and energy and something deeper that she could not name. It resonated through the tower, through the palace, through the entire planet. Beings who had never experienced beauty found themselves crying. Beings who had never felt joy found themselves laughing. Across the galaxy, on 4 other worlds, the same thing was happening. The 5 celestial were singing together for the first time since before most civilizations existed. Their song echoed through dimensions that humans could not see. It touched minds that had never been touched before. And it changed things. The 5 empires that had been rivals for millions of years found themselves connected by something they could not explain. How could you be enemies with someone when you had both felt that song? How could you fight wars when you knew that you wanted peace? It took decades, but slowly the 5 empires began to cooperate. They shared technology and knowledge. They opened trade routes. They stopped threatening each other with destruction. The celestial, once weapons of divine right, became bridges of understanding. Scholars and diplomats tried to explain what had happened. How had one human servant changed the course of galactic history? What was special about Myra that made her succeed where thousands of experts had failed? The answer was simple, but it took the galaxy a long time to understand it. Myra had seen as a person, that was all. She had looked at something ancient and powerful and completely unlike herself, and she had recognized a kindred soul. She had offered friendship without expecting anything in return. She had listened without trying to fix. She had simply been present. Humans called this ability empathy. The galaxy learned to call it humanity's gift. Myra lived out the rest of her life in the Obsidian Palace. She was no longer a servant. She was no longer a dead slave. She was the companion to the Celestial, a title that carried no official power but immense respect. Ambassadors sought her advice. Emperors asked for her blessing. Scientists studied her trying to understand how she had done the impossible. But Myra did not care about fame or power. Every day, she still climbed the stairs to the tower. Every day, she still sat with her friend and talked about everything and nothing. On her last night, when she was very old and very tired, curled around her tiny human body and kept her warm. "Thank you," they said, "for hearing me when no one else would." Myra smiled. Her eyes were closed, but she could feel the warmth of galaxy-covered scales, the pulse of ancient energy, the presence of a friend. "Thank you," she whispered back, "for letting me." She died peacefully, surrounded by starlight, in the embrace of a dragon who had wept for 300,000 years, and finally found comfort in the smallest, strangest, most wonderful creatures in the universe. Humans. In the centuries that followed, the story of Myra spread across the galaxy. It was told on 1,000 worlds in 1,000 languages. It became a legend, then a lesson, then a hope. Because if one small human could heal the heart of something so vast and ancient, what else might be possible? What other bridges might be built? What other loneliness might be cured? The galaxy looked at humanity differently after that. Humans were not the strongest species. They were not the or the fastest or the most powerful, but they had something rare. They had the ability to look at the alien, the strange, the completely other, and see a friend waiting to be made. They had empathy. And sometimes the galaxy learned that was enough to change everything.